Hola. Hey there, Dick.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. I'm just updating a program. I'll be off screen for a bit here.
Okay. It was snowing this morning.
Oh, was it really?
I got a heavy sweater on, and
I
hey,
got,
what are you gonna do?
yeah,
The South Africans, it's the beginning of summer.
I know. Must be nice.
Yeah, and I actually have I got down Dinga's last name, Sikwebu.
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 Yes.
So I did get it down. All right, but you can go ahead and introduce them and their titles, and then after and then give it to me. Then I'll do my speech, and then I'll go back to them each. So
Okay. All right. All right. I'm going to go on mute for just a second. And hi,
whatever
Milena.
you need to do. Whatever you need to do.
All righty.
Hi, sorry, I was on mute. Just wanted to say hi.
Hi.
I'll just be on hold in case you need me, but I'll be on mute letting you. It's pretty early still.
Right now, I'm still waiting to get on the screen.
Okay. All right.
So.
I'll be here if you need me. I'm just gonna give a call to Sylvia just to coordinate between the two of us, and
Sure.
it should be fine.
Right. Yeah, fine. Thanks.
All right. I think we're good. to
Yeah.
go. Hey there. Just monitoring email, see if any of the presenters have any trouble getting logged on.
I'm still looking. I can't see you, Michael, because I'm still looking at myself on the video preview. I haven't been.
Oh,
I don't know if
okay.
Yeah, I got this screen. The screen's blocked by a picture of myself.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it keeps going around and around, waiting.
Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah, we may have a bit of a
Well,
problem here.
We can see you and hear you just fine.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe I'll get off and get on again. Let me see if that works. Yeah,
Give
let
that
me
a
try
shot.
that. All right, very good.
Hello.
It worked.
Ah, great.
Yeah, excellent.
Hi,
Excellent.
Woodrudge.
Hey, hello. How's it?
Going well. Going well. How are you doing today? This evening?
Okay. It's about 7 o'clock, but in Cape Town we have late sunset, so it's quite bright outside.
Yeah.
It's almost summer, isn't it? It's almost summer.
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah. Well, we're into the first week of summer now.
Right.
Wow, nice,
What
nice.
time does the sun set?
Hey, in Cape Town, it's quite late. Sometimes it goes on to just past 8, 8:30, right? I think in peak summer, it's quite late. But
Yeah.
we have a later sunrise is a bit later.
Yeah, on our, at the summer solstice here where I am, it's almost 9 o'clock when the sun sets.
Ah,
We have about- we have
that's
about-
quite late.
Oh, yeah, it's late. About 15 hours and 40 minutes of daylight during the summer,
But it's
height of
funny
summer.
because the Durban, on the other hand, they have it's the other way around.
Yeah.
They have a very early sunrise.
It has to do with where they are in the time zone, right?
Yeah. But it's quite hot outside. It's now.
Well, it isn't here. It ain't here. It isn't here. I can tell you that.
No, I'm serious. You walk outside, you
Look at
start
that.
sweating. It's humid.
I got a winter sweater. Michael, you've been here have you been here in the winter, Michael?
I don't think so. I think I was there in, well, I think I was
June.
there in the fall. Was it?
Oh, in the fall, yeah.
Hey, Woodrow, can you remind me where you and Dinga are based out of? Which cities?
Well, I'm in Cape Town. I
Cape
used to
Town.
be in Durban, but a couple of years ago I moved up to Cape Town.
All right.
And Dinga is in Johannesburg.
All righty. Great. Thank you. Okay. Hi, Sylvia. Hey, Lauren.
Hi, how are you? Sorry, I'm getting hooked up here with everything.
All right. All right. No problem. I think we've already got some audience. Jana Palouche has joined us and she's in the chat box. How are you doing, Lauren?
So we don't have this set up to do a,
Apparently not, but that's okay. Folks can see pre-production.
okay.
Yeah. All right. I'm just going to give it a little bit more. Here comes Leo. And once we get our panelists on board, we'll do a round of introductions. So Woodrow, did everything look okay to you in terms of program? I saw the response from.
Yeah, I see you've made those changes, so that's fine.
Okay, great. And then Sylvia and Milena, did you see my email also just about the beginning orientation?
I did, yes.
So I'm just reading it. I'm so sorry.
No problem, no problem. Yeah, I was just saying, because we've got a full program, I'm going to try to get us started right away. And so I'm going to turn it over to you two at the beginning to do the orientation. And I just wanted to see, I forgot, I didn't time how long it took you to do that orientation, but if it's possible to do both within the first 4 minutes.
Oh, okay. Hopefully. I've never timed myself, so
Okay.
I'll try to do a short version.
Okay. Great.
I do have a question. I never found out how you resolve the Facebook issue.
That I don't know. That's, I'm going to defer to Leo and Judy when she comes on. I think they were the ones.
Okay.
researching that. Yeah. Leo, do you have an update on that?
I was not that plugged into the Facebook translation. I would also defer to Judy on that.
Okay. I think we decided mainly just to encourage people to register for Zoom if they were interested in getting an interpretation. I think that's
Okay.
where we ended up. Okay, so let's see. We've got Dingo logging in now. And we'll just give it another minute here. And Leo, you haven't gotten anything from anybody having issues, right?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, Dingo. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm okay.
Let's see. Mariano
Hi.
is in the chat box. Mariano, you should be on our screen right now as a presenter. Let me just check and make sure we have you set up that way. Yes, you should be. Leo, can you follow up to see about how we get Mariano on? He isn't registered as a panelist, so he should be able to We might need to send him another link. Hey, Judy.
He's on as an attendee right now? I don't
Good
see him.
morning.
Well, he's in the chat
Buenos
box.
dias.
Oh, wait, that's Leo. It says, hola. Leo, it says, you put something in the chat saying, soy Mariano.
I
That's
wonder.
why.
Oh, I
He's got
bet
your
he
link.
logged in. Yeah, he used my link. Yeah.
Okay, so the one that's Leo, there are two Leos in the so should I just promote them both to panelists?
Yes, because I don't see the other Leo. I see Leo. Well, I hear Leo. So yeah, if you could do that. There we go. Okay, and then let's change the name on that. Mariano, ¿nos escuchas? Hola, Mariano.
Hola,
buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes. Bienvenidos. All right. Okay, who are we missing? Samantha, Anna. I think that's it, no? Well, while we're waiting for the other two, just checking in with everybody, just to see if everybody got a chance to look at the program, make sure everything looks okay to you all. And then we're going to do a round of intros to everybody here on the screen in a bit. Mariano, ya has visto que yo cambié la pregunta al principio. Ok. Estás on mute. Hey, Samantha. Hi, Samantha.
So,
Okay, we're getting a lot of Leo Blaines here. Let me change names. Okay. All righty. And we got Mariana, Sylvia. I think Anna is the only one we're missing. Do we got another Leo Blaine waiting, Lauren?
I don't see one.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. If somebody could check your email, Leo, just to make sure she's not having issues.
Yeah, I haven't gotten anything from her yet.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't we, for the folks that are here, I just wanted to introduce you to, or folks can do introductions, who you are, because we have a number of our support staff today that'll be backing you all up. And let's see. Here we go. I think we got another. There's Anna. Great. We'll wait for her to get her audio going. Hola, Ana.
Hola,
Sorry.
¿qué tal?
Buenos días, I think where you're at, or buenas tardes. Okay.
Buenas tardes.
Okay. So why don't we go ahead, just do a quick round of introductions, and then we'll just go over last minute issues, and then we'll be getting started in about 7 minutes. So let's start with our interpreters. Milena and Sylvia, can you introduce yourselves?
I can go first. Hi, my name is Milena Cuadra. I'll be assisting with the webinar with the Spanish interpretation. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. And where are you based out of, Milena?
I am based out of New Hampshire and sometimes Boston.
All right, great.
I go back and forth.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us today. And then Sylvia.
So hi, my name is Sylvia, and I am also a Spanish interpreter, and I am here in Chicago. So, hola, soy Silvia Escárcega, yo soy la otra intérprete. Disculpen que está el sonido de mi impresora, ahorita se calla, pero estoy aquí en Chicago.
Muy bien.
Okay, so let's go to the LNS staff. Leo.
Hey, my name's Leo Blaine. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm in Tacoma Park, Maryland.
All right, thank you, Leo. And Judy.
Good morning, good afternoon. Buenas tardes, soy Judy in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm trying my Spanish here. Estoy la directora de informaciones y comunicaciones.
Right,
Lo siento.
No worries, good job. Okay, let's go to Lauren.
Hello all, Lauren Burke, Organizing Director with LNS here in Tacoma Park, Maryland. Hola, soy Lauren Burke, estoy en Tacoma Park, Maryland. Soy directora de organización aquí para LNS.
All right, thank you. Okay, so presenters, let's go to Mariano.
Buenas tardes, son las 6 de la tarde aquí en España. Soy Mariano Sanz y soy el secretario confederal de Comisiones Obreras de Medio Ambiente y Movilidad. Es un placer estar aquí con todos vosotros.
All right, gracias, Mariano. Let's go to Dinga.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dinga Sikwebu. I'm connecting from Johannesburg in South Africa, and I work for the National Union of Metalworkers in South Africa, NUMSA, and I'm glad to be part of this panel.
Great, thank you, Dinga. Woodraj.
Hello, everyone. It's good to be on this program. I'm based in Cape Town, and I just want to say that just a bit of background. Yeah, I also worked for NUMSA for about 20 years. I'm retired in the end of 2015. So good to be on this program and to share a bit of our experience with you.
Great,
Thanks.
thank you. And Anna.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ana Belén Sanchez. I'm the regional specialist on green jobs for the International Labour Organization, normally based in Mexico City, but now in Madrid, so 6 p.m. as well here. Hola a todos, Ana Belén Sánchez, la especialista regional en empleo verde de la Organización Internacional de Trabajo, normalmente en México, pero ahora por el COVID en Madrid. Así que nada, muy buenas tardes a todos.
Thank you. Okay, Samantha.
So,
Hey, everybody. My name's Sam Smith. I work for the International Trade Union Confederation, running the Just Transition Center, and I'm based in Oslo, Norway. So 6 hours ahead of you all. Thanks very much for the invitation to be here.
Thank you, Samantha. And Richard, last but not least.
Richard Litzitz. I'm president of the Western New York Area Labor Federation and Afl-Cio in the Buffalo, New York region of New York State. And I'm also very pleased to be with you.
All right. All right. Thanks, everybody. Michael Leon Guerrero. I'm the Executive Director of Labor Network for Sustainability. We're getting started in just a couple of minutes. So I just wanted to share a couple of last minute notes. First of all, when we get started, I'm going to try to get us started as soon as possible because we've got a full program. We want to hear from you all as much as possible. So I'm going to first turn it over at the very beginning to Sylvia. So we're not going to start the interpretation function until Sylvia does the orientation for folks. Once we do that, then we'll go ahead and get that going. Introductions. So given that we have a lot of people that are speaking, I'm going to do the introductions at the beginning in my opening remarks, but I am going to keep it short. I'm going to do name, organization, where you're located. Lauren is going to post your biographies in the chat box while I'm doing that. So that way people will see a little bit more detail about your background. So apologize for that. It's not obviously going to do justice to your all's background and experience, but really the main thing for us is to be able to give you as much time as possible to present. And then I think that's it. So you have access to the program. Any questions that come up, let me know. So Lauren is on board to, in case we get anybody that Zoom bombs us, she'll get them off as soon as possible. She's gotten very good at that. So should happen very quickly. Leo is your technical support. If you run into any problems, shoot him a message in the chat or email, and he will work with you on getting that set up. And then Judy's here also to back up for anything that comes up during the webinar. Questions will be coming through the chat box and the function on Zoom. We've got a team of our staff that's reviewing those and putting them in a document. Those will be forwarded to me and I will ask the questions when we get to that section. And then Richard will moderate the conversation from there. Okay, any last second questions?
Yes, I could not hear very well, Woodra. When you need to speak up or to get closer to the microphone, I could not hear you very well, which might be a problem. I also want to remind you, please, Michael, to I know you want to do things fast, but please say the names and the organizations slowly.
Will do.
I'm not going to be able to catch up if
Okay.
you do it fast.
No problem.
Thank you.
Will do.
So, Michael, we have something super important we need to figure out here. And if you don't see the globe, then we're not going to be able to go
I do.
into oh, you do. Great.
Yeah. So I'm going to start that as soon as Sylvia gives me the signal to do that. Right?
As long as you see it, that's great.
Yeah, I do. Okay. Great. I think we are ready to go. So let's just give it a few minutes. We got people logging on. So welcome everybody who's logging in. We're going to get going in just about a minute. And we are going to start as close to on time as possible. So we've got a full program. And we have presenters that from around the world that are visiting us in the evenings. And so we want to make sure they can get to the rest of their weekend. So I'm going to give it just one more minute, and then we will turn it over to do an orientation on interpretation. So in the meantime, feel free to just introduce yourself in the chat box, and then we will get going shortly. Thanks. Okay, Samantha, how's the weather there in Norway? Is it snowing? Oh, you're on mute.
Worst of both worlds. So sleeting, rain, and 5 hours of daylight.
Ah, I heard there's actually a special name for that. I forgot what it's called, but there's a word.
Well, we have different names for this kind of weather, but yeah.
Oh yeah, in Norway.
How is it in Albuquerque? Nice, I guess.
Nice and nice. It's cold, but it's sunny out here. So yeah, we're getting nice weather. All right, I see folks logging in and introducing themselves in the chat box. All right, we've got Alaska, San Francisco, Oakland, Hadley, Massachusetts, Ventura County, California. And oh, Jane Fonda, welcome Jane, glad you could join us. Bruce Hamilton is with us from ATU. We've got Boise, Idaho in. San Francisco, Wheat Ridge, Colorado, welcome. Okay, here's Harriet Applegate, one of our board members in Cleveland, Ohio. Welcome, Harriet, and Richmond, Virginia. Okay, and there's Nora from Barcelona. We're going to, I think that's going to be our cue to get started then. So, all right, folks, welcome. I'm going to turn it over right away to Sylvia Escarcega. She is going to give you an orientation on how to use the interpretation function, and then we will get that function started as soon as she's done. So Sylvia, thank you for doing this, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Michael. I'm going to start in Spanish. Buenos días y muchas gracias por venir a este webinario para poder utilizar la función de interpretación de Zoom. En un momento, en sus pantallas, en la parte de abajo va a aparecer un globo. Todavía no está ahí. En el momento que aparezca, hacen clic ahí y van a poder ver el canal de español o de inglés. Si se están conectando a través de una tableta o un teléfono, donde encuentran la función de interpretación es haciendo clic en los tres puntitos o donde dice more o más, y ahí siguen las instrucciones de los menús. Primero buscan la interpretación, después encuentran los canales y después hacen clic en listo. Hi, in just a few moments we're going to turn on the interpretation feature in Zoom. Once it's on, at the bottom of your screen, you're going to be able to see a globe. Once you click on the globe, you're going to see the different interpretation channels, and you can pick up whatever channel you want. If you're joining us via phone or a tablet, you click the three dots where it says more, and you follow the instructions. There will be menus on language interpretation. Then you can choose the language channel. And the most important thing is that you have to click done when you have chosen your channel so you can hear the interpretation. Thank you. Michael, we can start with the interpretation feature.
Great, thank you, Sylvia. And I just started that. So it should be, it says it's available. So look for the globe in the menu bar at the bottom of your screen. Okay, if you have any issues with that, please post something in the chat and we'll have somebody work with you on getting that straightened out. So again, everybody, welcome. My name is Michael Leon Guerrero. I'm the Executive Director of the Labor Network for Sustainability. And thank you for joining us for this very special webinar, Workers and Just Transition, a Global Perspective. So our program will begin shortly with a framing and introduction by President Richard Litzitz, followed by a roundtable discussion with our guests. There will be a short question and answer period at the end. You can submit your questions through the chat box or in the question function at the bottom of your screen. So I'll be reading the questions, and more than likely we won't get to all of them. So we'll save and forward the list to presenters afterwards, and they can follow up with you via email. One of our staff will be monitoring the webinar for Zoom bombers, and we'll get anyone off as soon as possible if there are disruptions. This webinar is also being recorded, and the link will be shared with all registrants within the next few days. The Labor Network for Sustainability is a network of unions, other labor organizations, climate justice organizations, and individuals. Our mission is to engage workers and communities to build a transition that is ecologically sustainable and economically just. In May of this year, we initiated a national Just Transition listening project, interviewing over 100 workers and community leaders from various industries and sectors in 26 states. We wanted to learn from the direct experience of workers and community leaders who have been through economic transitions, are going through them now, or anticipate that they will be. We'll be publishing the findings and recommendations of this project in the next month. We hope to inform policies and programs on economic transitions so that they're more effective and grounded in the real life experience of the people most affected, and to continue to build a national network to coordinate on just transition strategies. As part of the listening project, we've also conducted a series of monthly webinars, bringing together different voices and perspectives on just transition. We've explored the impact of the pandemic. We discussed Black workers and just transition, historical perspectives from the Just Transition Alliance, young workers, and Indigenous and community environmental justice perspectives from the Climate Justice Alliance. We're very honored to have a distinguished panel of international labor leaders today to join us for our conversation. People who are grappling with the question of just transition nationally, regionally, and internationally. The United States has not handled large-scale economic transitions well throughout its history, often leaving workers and communities behind. Today, we look to our counterparts from other parts of the world to offer insights that may help us navigate the economic transition we are currently going through, and that we'll face in the effort to create a climate protection economy. There are a number of union representatives in our audience today that are advocating to assure new jobs that are being created in the renewable energy economy are good union jobs and raise living standards for workers and communities in their states. I want to particularly thank you for joining us, because it'll take all of us to deal with the very real challenges of how to protect the workers and communities who are being impacted by changes in our economy. So let me introduce first our panelists, and I sincerely apologize. In the interest of time, I'm going to name their titles and their names, and we will be posting their bios in the chat box. We're doing this so we make sure that we have as much time as possible to hear from our presenters, and I know this will not do justice to their background and experience and their leadership. First of all, Samantha Smith, who is the director of the Just Transition Center of the International Trade Union Confederation based in Oslo, Norway. Ana Belén Sanchez is a green job specialist for the International Labor Organization for Latin America based in Mexico City. Mariano Sanz Lubero is appointed Secretary of Trade Union Elections and Membership and Confederal Secretary of Environment and Mobility in Spain for Comisiones Obreras. Woodraj Arun is former education and parliamentary officer for the National Union of Metalworkers of South Africa, based in Cape Town. And Dinga Sikwebu is a researcher for special projects with the National Union of Metalworkers of South Africa in Johannesburg. I'm very honored now to turn the program over to Richard Litzitz, president of the Western New York Area Labor Federation of the Afl-Cio. It's a volunteer elected position that oversees the entire Western New York area and includes 5 central labor councils over 6 counties. President Litzitz has been a longstanding advocate for labor, social, racial justice, and human rights over the past 40 years. He's worked for the International Brotherhood of Teamsters and Service Employees International Union, spending most of his time bargaining and servicing labor contracts agreements. President Litzitz was also the director of the Buffalo Labor Studies Program for the Western New York region of the Cornell Institute for Labor and Industrial Relations. He's been an important leader in guiding a just transition effort for the shutdown of the Huntley coal-fired power plant in Tonawanda, New York, which is often lifted up as an important model for just transition in the United States. So please join me in welcoming President Richard Litzitz.
Thank you, Michael. It's a real pleasure to be on this panel for this important discussion. I'm looking forward to it with great anticipation. In November of 2016, I was lucky enough to be invited, and I visited as part of a group, Germany. And we went to the old coal mining region in the Ruhr Valley near Essen, Germany. And then we also went over to the eastern part of the country and visited the above ground coal mining region. The issue at hand was the transition from coal mining and coal to renewable energy, and how that transition was made by the German government and people, and how it's being made by the German government and people. And the invitation was from the German Green Party Foundation in New York City. Our Labor Federation was part of this tour to examine this, and we were invited to look at the vexing questions related to the termination of coal production and use in Germany.
So sorry, the interpretation has been ended, so we need to turn it on again.
Oh.
Okay, apologies. I just started it again.
Okay, all right, I'll start back from the invitation. The invitation was provided by the German Green Party Foundation in New York City. And the issue was to be part of a group that would look at the vexing problems related to transition from coal production and use over to renewables in that country. Our Labor Federation is made up of 140 affiliated local unions, and it embraces over 145,000 individuals in the Buffalo, New York area, which is in the western part of the country of the state of New York on the Canadian border. We were invited because of a successful campaign which was built around the closing of a coal-fired energy plant in the suburb of Buffalo called Tonawanda, and the subsequent program to save the largely working class community in that town. Save it meaning saving their tax base. In short, an alliance, a coalition was formed to shore up the tax base of the town, to avoid large layoffs in the public sector of that town, especially the school district, but not just the school district, to avoid other austerity measures that would have been caused by the shutdown of the plant and the loss of the tax revenue from the plant. The plant was the largest taxpayer in the town. The coalition was made up of environmental justice group called the Clean Air Coalition of Western New York, and the unions of our federation, and especially the Kenmore Teachers Union and the steelworkers in that area. We built community support. We went to the industrial unions. The steelworkers were particularly interested because of any concerns about the taxes being raised on the industrial users, including their employers. We built support among working class residents who lived around the coal-fired plant. And we went to political leaders of the town and their county for their support. This effort resulted in the passage of New York state legislation called the Fossil Fuel Closure Act of 2015. This act provided hard dollars to the municipalities in New York State that were being afflicted with the shutdown of coal-fired and fossil fuel plants, so that those towns' tax bases were not devastated and they would not have to lay off further workers in the public sector because of the shutdown, because of the closure. So we went to Germany, and we were there in order to observe and ask questions and discuss some of the vexing issues around transition. And And we met with the unions there. We met with employer groups there. We met with government groups. We met with the political party, Green Party, and had very deep and detailed discussions. And then we went and visited places where coal mines used to be, how they've been reused, where new jobs have been created over there, and where training programs were being implemented. It was a fascinating experience. I can tell you that the differences between what's happening in Germany, and this is 4 years ago, and I've not stayed up to date to this day about this question in Germany. But the one thing I can tell you is that the employers agree that climate change was real, that global warming is real, and that it must be addressed. The government takes a key role in this process. The union and the communities, working class, especially the working class communities around these plants, were complete and full participants in problem solving related to transition. And all of these things lead to a conclusion that there are very different approaches that have been taken in the United States and are currently being taken in the United States, obviously. I just, as a side point, I went there the week after Donald Trump was elected president in 2016. So the discussion of what policies the Trump administration would take towards transition were hot topics for everybody who went there, including myself. And of course, the subsequent role in policies of the Trump administration just are disastrous for this just transition away from fossil fuels to a new economy where new jobs and new energy is produced on a clean basis. So the differences were stark. The comparisons were serious. But what I can say is the multifaceted approach and the, I think, tripartite approach to the problem: government, the union, actually four sectors: the government, the unions, the employers. Those are three sectors. Tripartite approach were the most glaring differences to the problem in the United States and how to handle it. So, Michael, that's what I wanted to say to start. And now I get the opportunity to ask questions of our panelists.
Hey, Richard, do you mind, we're still having some issues with interpretation. I'm going to try to add Milena again, and then we might have to restart the interpretation. It will just take a second.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, está bien.
All right. Milena, go and try it now. You should be at it.
Not
No,
yet.
Doesn't look like it. Okay. One more time. Okay, I'm not seeing you on the screen. Give me just a second. Milena, still not working?
Michael, the interpretation is not on, so I'm
okay,
also
that's
not
right.
assigned as interpreter.
All right, one more time here. Okay, we're gonna have to continue to work on this. Sylvia, if you can continue to do the interpretation for now, I will get it started again, and then we will.
Sorry, Michael, we can't. The interpretation feature is not on, and
Yes,
so I can't
I'll turn
do
it
the
on right now.
interpretation.
Okay.
Okay, yes, but I will continue once it's on.
Okay, there we go. Does it work on now? Okay. There we go. All right, Dick, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Yes, the fourth part of the group of the participants in Germany was the working class communities. That's the other part I was trying to get to: the government, the employers, the union, and those communities themselves. Okay, I would like to ask a question of Samantha, and I'm going to start with you, Samantha. Tell us about the global scale of the problems workers are facing in terms of economic insecurity and just transition. Can you do that for us, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Richard. And thanks very much for the invitation to participate today. Two quick things about ITUC. So ITUC is the global peak body for most of the world's unions, and through our affiliates, we represent over 200 million organized workers in 162 countries. And I run a center for ITUC that does a very practical thing. We help unions get good plans for just transition, which can be a collective bargaining agreement, a law, an investment plan, and so on. Our context right now is, I mean, you can just look around in the US and see how it is in most places that have been hard hit by COVID. So we've lost about 500 million formal jobs worldwide, and 1.5 billion people globally work in informal jobs, so without contracts, or have either lost their livelihoods because of lockdowns or breakdowns in supply chains, or fear that they're about to lose them. And even in rich countries like the US, UK, we have not only families living in poverty or falling into poverty, but we have children going hungry. So we're in a huge economic and jobs crisis, as well as this massive public health crisis. And at the same time, you know, we're still in a climate crisis, and we're still working with our affiliates and their members on just transition. But there is no conversation that we're going to have with any of our affiliates or members or people who should be our members right now that doesn't start with jobs and end with social protection, income support, healthcare, and so on. Because that is what people really need right now. If you can have climate action that speaks to those two things, to the concerns of working class and poor people, then you can have a lot of climate action. But if it's just about targets and gigatons and it's not going to create jobs, it's not going to make people's lives better right now, then you're not going to get very far. So I think I'll stop there. I have lots of concrete examples to give, but maybe that'll come in the Q&A.
Well, I think that's very helpful. And of course, I agree completely with the point that you're making. So I'm going to go on now to Anna. Anna, can you tell us about the Climate Action for Jobs initiative of the ILO, the International Labor Organization, and what have been the responses from labor around the world, I take it? You're muted. You're muted.
Sí, disculpa. Yo voy a hablar en español. ¿Está bien la traducción? Sí, ¿verdad? Está funcionando bien. Entonces, déjame primero que presente la Organización Internacional de Trabajo, porque somos una organización un poco diferente.
Organization that is quite different from the rest of the organizations that are represented in this webinar. We are an UN organization. We are a specialized agency in terms of labor, and we work internationally to regulate employment, all the labor relations, the labor rights, and if you get an idea, also the protection to motherhood, maternity, paternity, the 8 hours of work, and many other things have been agreed upon at the ILO. So we are different to other organizations in the UN because we are tripartite. That means we have administrative council in which we have the private sector through employee organizations, also the sector of workers through unions, and also government represented by the ministers. So this tripartite spirit permeates the whole organization and our work. In 2015, we agreed in the Administrative Council of the organization the Just Transition Guidelines. This is a set of policies that tell us about the road that has been taken by the countries that want to do a just transition. And we have seen that the number of countries has been increasing, the number of regions or countries that are interested in having just transition policies because of different situations. Sometimes because there are sectors that will be reduced drastically, and therefore there will be a loss of jobs. But it's not the case for every single country. In other countries, there is also a very serious need to create green jobs, so they can protect nature, they can protect the environment, they can fight against climate change and reduce pollution. So in order to be able to support those countries, and the number of which is increasing, in 2019, in the framework of, how do you say, the climate forum organized by the Secretary of the UN, they agreed on this climate action for employment. And what we are doing as ILO is to accompany and aid the countries, private sector and community organizations that want to be accompanied in this just transition. At this moment, we're working with 50 countries who have expressed their interest in being supported in this endeavor. And we are beginning to work in this initiative. And also it's important to mention that we have a very important focus on green recovery after COVID-19. Why? Because it is destroying employment enormously. In Latin America and the Caribbean, 47 million jobs have been destroyed, and it is expected to have more loss of jobs. So the focus right now is how to promote a green recovery from the just transition. I'm going to leave it at this, and we can continue later on.
Good, thank you very, very much. I'm going to go to Mariano. Mariano, in Spain, there are closures of coal mining operations and thermal power plants. How are the social and economic impacts of these closures being addressed? And what opinion does your union have of this process?
Muy bien, buenas tardes. Es un
Good
placer.
afternoon. It is a pleasure to be able to be with you here. And the carbon reconversion in Spain, it started in the 1990s. Since 1990, we have been trying these reconversion projects. In that time, 25,000 workers were working in the mines. And there has been a series of processes and plans that have not resulted in what we wanted. In the year 2018, for example, they had to close the mines because the European Union was going to stop payment to support this kind of work because of the quality and the work and the difficulties. We're making these industries no competitive. Then we had a lot of concerns because if there was no agreement, then the workers were going to be unprotected. In 2018, there was a tripartite agreement between the state, the companies, and the workers that had two pillars: how to link the possibility of getting help to the workers, that it was adequate in terms of retirement plans, or formation plans, and also support measures so they would not suffer the closures very badly. And we work with the workers, the employers and the industries and the companies. And we also made an agreement with structural measures to support the economic reactivation. The main one that is being developed is the rehabilitation of the zones exploited by the mining industry, which means the environmental recovery. And this will be giving jobs to a big part of the workforce. And we also have some plans for the economic activation. And in this moment, they have been brought together with a new formula to support the processes of just transition. And before they were simply helping the workers and giving money to the local administration and governments for them to manage that. right now it has changed. So we are talking about projects that where the public has participated, and we have collected, of the 13 agreements that we have opened, we have 2,000 proposals of projects. And an important part of those proposals, well, is to have promoters and entrepreneurs. And there is a very important, they're giving a lot of important money. There's private money, well, finance. They're providing money to the private companies and the public companies. And there's a lot of interest to be able to, all the energy that is going to be produced by renewable energy is really important. And that's what we're trying to promote, these kinds of projects. Those projects will have to go to public commentary and public opinion, and we're going to figure out what is it that the Institute for the Just Transition has chosen. They're going to be choosing the most important projects, and all the decided projects will have some financing at the level of Spain, but also at the level of the European Union, because Spain is trying to reactivate economically the regions, and also want to support the ecological transition and the energy transition, which is right now we're doing. And I will be explaining more about this later on. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very, very much. Now we're going to go to the first of two from South Africa, Widraj. Can you tell us about some of the latest developments regarding just transition in South Africa and labor's response to these, please?
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I'm going to deal with this question in two parts. The first part, just to address the issue on the side of government. In 2011, the South African government adopted a renewable energy independent power producer program. And this actually became its flagship program. And it was, it formed a very, very important part of its plan to introduce renewable energy in its energy mix and onto the grid. And they did this through a bidding system. You had bid window 1 to bid window 4, and there are now plans to introduce a bid window 5. And so bid window 5 is now on the table to attract and call for proposals from investors and developers and so on. For its part, Labour signed a Green Accord with social partners in 2011 as part of its commitment towards establishing a sustainable ecosystem. But around 2017, the country's major labor federation turned its back on renewables and the decommissioning of old coal power stations. And they complained that there would be a loss of jobs and so on. Just to put these things into perspective, the stop-start nature of government's renewable energy program, its dependence on the North for finance and technology, and its inability to build a socially owned renewable energy sector to absorb workers from traditional energy-based fossil sources. And all of this coupled with Labour's skepticism, Labour was very skeptical of the renewable energy program, are just some of the problems and challenges that the country now faces as we come to grips with the question of a just transition. And I think this is basically what sums it up. So we'll probably have more discussion on this, and I think it would feed in, some of it would feed in through Dinga Sekwebu's comments as well. So I'll just leave it at that for the moment. Thanks.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks. Sekwebu, I'm sorry, Dinga. Can you tell us about the climate charter in South Africa and Labour's relationship to the climate charter, please?
Sí.
You have to come off mute. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Richard. Let me just say that the Climate Justice Charter comes out
El de clima viene como un
organizations on the issue of drought that affected the country. And this drought campaign was led by a movement called the South African Food Sovereignty Campaign. As the movements in this campaign realized that climate change was going to affect South Africa quite severely, they realized and decided to come up with an overarching document, which is a climate justice charter. And this charter was concluded in June of this year and has signatories to it of 237 organizations. Unfortunately and regrettably, only one organization out of the more than 200 organizations that are signatories to the charter is a trade union. And I think that indicates what Woodraj was talking about, that in the last 5 years, as a result of the failure of the government's renewable energy power program to deliver on its promises, there has been a dramatic recoiling on part of labor from concretely supporting initiatives linked to a just transition. There are plans to decommission 4 power plants as from the year 2022. And as we get closer to this date, to decommission a fleet of coal-fired power stations, labor's commitment to a just transition in our country is becoming more rhetorical and the posture more defensive.
Oh, all right. Maybe we can come back to that one before the end of the discussion. I'm going to come back, go around again for a second go around. First to Samantha. And what are the ITUC, the International Trade Union Confederation, main priorities now, and where does Just Transition fit into that program?
Well, so on the very top level, our priorities are democracy for the people, just transition for climate ambition, and a new social contract. I mean, just looking at the chat, I know that for a lot of people, you hear new social contract and you think, okay, but why aren't we asking for much more systemic change? Like, why is this only about jobs and social protection? And the answer is 2 things. I mean, one is, what do our members want? So if we're looking at this from like, what are the needs from our members who are desperate in many countries? They need cash transfers and healthcare right this second. They need some, prospect of a decent job, and they need a change from the model that has us where we are today to at least a model of capitalism where workers are getting their fair share of all of the profit that's generated in our economies. I guess the other answer to this is that within this concept of just transition, and hey, Jackie, we met at a workshop with Noam and Kosatu in Joburg a while back. The other answer to this is that, what's in just transition also includes taking a hard look at ownership models, right? So just transition is not just about, okay, you're going to get a slight increase in your wage, and if you're lucky, you're going to get some kind of benefit system that the government scrapes together from whatever taxes it can get out of companies. Actually, just transition is built on this foundation of not only fair tax, but a fair distribution of the surplus value of labor.
Right.
So that's definitely one interpretation of it. And how all of these things fit with our front lines are basically like, as we hope that we're going to be coming out of this crisis over the next year, we must fight for a fair and just share for working people, and also for people who are shut out of our economy right now. So people are not working for one reason or another.
It's very, anyhow, I think, personally, I think these are excellent points to be made. They have to be remembered. Anna, many workers in Latin America, in the global South, are in the informal sector. What are the implications for these workers in a just transition to climate safe economy? That's for Anna.
Sí, mira, esto es un tema fundamental para América Latina y para el sur global. Perdón, un momento. Perdón, que había apagado la interpretación. Es un tema fundamental para América Latina y para el sur global porque, para que os hagáis una idea, en América Latina y el Caribe, más de la mitad de los trabajadores y de las trabajadoras no tienen un empleo formal. Es que estoy escuchando la interpretación en inglés. No sé por qué.
Seems like it's not working. Give us just a second.
It's not working well. So should I continue in Spanish or should I move to English? Oh, it's okay.
Try going to English for now, Anna,
Vale,
and then
bueno,
we'll
sigo
see
a
if
ver
that
si me
works.
concentro con la
I can
interpretación.
concentrate with the interpretation. So,
Oh, there it
sorry,
is. Now it's working.
it is working now. The problem with the informal jobs is that it's fundamental because when a person has an informal job, first, they don't have rights, labor rights that are recognized. They don't have a labor contract that regulate the relationship of employer-employee. They don't have salaries, safe or irregular. Some days they have a lot of income and some days they have really low income. At the moment of the pandemic of COVID-19, the most affected of the pandemic undoubtedly was the informal economy, and they were the first ones to have no kind of job whatsoever. And by not having access to the social protection, they've been without any support from anybody, from companies or government. So
en América Latina y el Caribe y en general en el sur difiere un tanto
the first
cómo se está viendo la transición justa en Europa, en Estados
justice
Unidos,
transition in Europe, United States, and Canada, and countries with higher income, because the kind of measures that we need in the justice transition and the reality of the employment in unions are very different. So the focus has to be from the improvement of the jobs of people and the sectors where it's going to be, and not just energy. It's fishing, it's agriculture, so that you can have an idea. In some countries, the informal jobs in sectors as important as agriculture for climate change, and we have to think that a third of the emissions is about 90% of the sector. And if we're talking about women, the informality is much, much higher. So this is fundamental. Doing in the organization is to promote a justice transition that allows us to do two things: a transition to a more sustainable economy with climate change, but also to improve the quality of employment, including the informality of employment, the training, so that the workers are part of unions. Small companies, the same thing happens. They need to organize better and become part of the added value of their production. Problem that is fundamental because we don't even, and I'll finish up with this. It's not even possible that the climate change policies from the countries are actually enforced, because a lot of these are focused on formal sectors, so it's impossible to do so. So this problem is fundamental.
Thank you. Thank you. Back to Mariano. What lessons can be drawn, excuse me, from the experiences of the Workers' Commission that can be useful for other workers in communities?
Bueno, yo quería decir dos cosas previas, un poco antes, enlazando con lo de antes, ¿no? Lo primero, decir que, otra vez, tengo la traducción, ¿no? También en... ¿Perdona?
Ya estamos listos. The first thing is that our organization, our union, started with a mind, and there's a lot of situations that are traumatic and we have to face. we have from our organization, one of the fundamental issues is cohesive messaging. It can't be that sectors say one thing and the territories say other. The union has to cohesion that message. And this is very important. In that manner, to allow the internal debate federationally and nationally, it's very important because the foundation of our understanding is the just transition, which is the foundation that we are putting forward and we're focusing on. The just transition is 4 factors. First, to protect the workers that are affected. Implement policies structurally that are preparing. So when those, from the point of view of formation, investigation, and formulas of financing. Third is planning. A lot of processes, you have to sit down now to mark a route for those paths. We can't wait for a situation that is traumatic to intervene. That is the very important. And also we need norms from the countries that so we may have some certainty. And it's very important to have private finance. All of that, we need control, public control, that all those are oriented to the objectives, not just to good economic managing, but also from the point of view of sustainability, economic, and environmentally. And another thing I would like to stand out is that we need to put environment in the countries as a focus, whether they are affected by the transition or not, because the transition is important and it's going to. And if we want to have an important role in this, we have to be an active participant of that change. And we have to prepare for that. In that context, from our worker commissions, 20 years ago, we've been, that has facilitated information and trainings and consultations. We have been doing over 20 years of training so that when we're in those processes, we have the technical criteria and in the union so that we can condition those changes. Besides, this is the mind of a lot of great people that are experts like Ana Belén. In that aspect is fundamental. And I'll stop, Richard. We need to be implicated in the social aspect, meaning not just in the labor action, but we have to also be with the social organizations that are fighting for those environmental policies and fighting with the climate change, for the climate change. Thank you.
That's wonderful. I mean, it's obvious that we're starting to see this question of the labor organizations, working class organizations going along with government and having a inclusive, very inclusive and very strong direction in order to have this work on a national or a global basis. You can't leave people out. I'm going to go now to Woodrush again. We're doing very well on time, panelists. So we might even have a chance to go back around a little bit more for any parting thoughts before we open to question and answer. But Woodrush, what are the prospects for trade unions to collaborate with other social movements in South Africa on climate issues and just transition? Please, Woodrush.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Look, we have to go back a little bit here because in 2011 there was and that's when the South Africa and in Durban, they hosted COP17, UNFCCC COP17. And there was a lot of excitement about this. There was I think you saw the trade unions, you saw social movements and environmental groupings like Earth Like Africa. We have Groundwork. We have the South Durban Community Environmental Alliance and Greenpeace South Africa. So you saw a number of trade unions, trade union federations, and environmental activist organizations, community-based organizations, all coming together. And I think there was a lot of excitement of the fact that South Africa was hosting COP17. And they came together and they stood united, I think, on a number of issues like decommissioning, coal and fossil fuel energy plants. And also, that they recognized that there was a need to shift our energy system from fossil fuels to cleaner sources of energy, such as renewables. That was around 2011, and it lasted for a few years. I think Labour's U-turn in 2017, and I think Dinga has pointed this out, that it's regrettable that just one trade union signed a climate charter amongst 250 other organizations. I think this is indeed regrettable, but we've got to see this and it's a serious issue. It isn't a simple issue. You've got to see this Labour's U-turn. What does it really mean for this transition? So they're very skeptical because they don't believe, and in a way, the country's renewable energy independent power producer procurement program hasn't really created, sort of mass scale jobs to absorb workers from traditional energy sectors. So there is this, they feel very, Labour in a way sometimes, and they react to this and they feel very uncomfortable about it. But there are other bigger problems, and they are sort of political as well. So Labour's U-turn away from renewables is, unlike 2011, when there was all this excitement and enthusiasm about building a blue-green or red-green alliance, their response now is somewhat muted towards renewables. So it's going to take a lot of work to actually bring and sort of rebuild this and renew these relationships that we had earlier on in 2011. It's going to take a lot of work to do that. And until we are able to unpack and properly understand what this just transition means, not just for government, but it's only when workers, their communities and organizations, it's only when they become material beneficiaries of these changes, then we can seriously talk about a just transition and say, look, there's something happening. But if the workers and their communities or their organizations don't benefit from this, then Labour is going to probably remain very, very skeptical about this just transition. So it's not something that we want to cast aside, but I think we've got to put these things in perspective, and we've got to try and build, and we have to try and renew these relationships and build them again. But on the side of social movements, environmental, and particularly environmental justice movement, they also have to broaden their constituencies. They must become, they not all are broad-based. They have to broaden their constituencies, and I think there's lessons here as well, so that we make these changes real, and to make these changes and to make the transition real, make it real and make it possible. And hopefully Labour will have a rethink on many of these issues and come back to the table so that we can forge these alliances and build these relationships again. Thanks.
It's wonderful. I just wanted to make a point here that I don't know a single one of my colleagues on the executive board of my labor federation or other people I know around the country who deny that global warming and climate change is a real thing. It's not the question. They understand that. The question is what to do with their members, what to do with the people, the members and the families and the communities where these members live. Where are they going to make a living? How are they going to make a living? And this is not a small thing. And unless we have cooperation among the environmental groups, the social movements, as you just put it, I think that's correct, and the working class organizations, which include the labor unions in countries like the United States, unless we have coordination and an attempt to address these very vexing questions. This isn't an easy thing. The United States went through deindustrialization. We used to have 33% of our workforce as late as the 1960s in industrial manufacturing. It's down to about 8 to 10%. And we had no national policy to deal with that. So you can go through a city like Buffalo, New York, which is a big city, and you just see empty industries, factories are still there. They dot the landscape. because there was never a national program to actually deal with this issue. Now we would never have had that under Trump. It's just not, that wasn't going to happen. In fact, he took us away from any discussion of these things. I'm hoping that this new administration will have the opportunity to speak to these questions and develop something that brings everybody together. And to do that, we have to gore some oxes. So let's start goring some oxes and bringing people together to solve this problem. Because I said it before, nobody I know denies that the world is warming up and it's dangerous. Nobody. There was another, we were going to go to Dinga, I believe, next. What's the most, Dinga, what's the most important issue for workers in the global north, yes, to understand about just transition in the global south?
Thanks, Richard. I think that it is important for our comrades, brothers and sisters in the global north to carefully listen to the perspectives on just transition that are coming out of the global south. For unions in the global south, at the center of just transitions are issues and notions of justice and equity, firstly. Secondly, when unions in the South speak about a just transition, they are clear that we cannot ignore the contributions of colonial, neo-colonial, and imperial domination to climate crisis the climate crisis that we face. And I think that it is important for the global labor movement not to ignore the calls from the South for some reparations and the issue of ecological debt. Thirdly, I think that it's important for unions in the North to appreciate that when we as trade unions in the global South speak about a just transition, we are talking about an overhaul of the global financial and trade systems. For us in the global South, to implement just transitions, for an example, will require access to renewable energy technologies. The asymmetrical access to these technologies and the existing intellectual property regimes make it impossible for us to move. And I think that the recoiling in South Africa that we've seen over the last 5 years on the part of the labor movement is a result that the transition that we have seen has been an unjust one. What we've seen are multinational corporations from the global north who have come with their technology and have moved in with little jobs being created, and they've taken over the sector and displacing a number of people from the traditional sectors. And I think that it is important for us as the global movement to think about that this question of just transition being the questions of justice and equity. And we in the South are very clear that those who are responsible primarily for the mess that we find ourselves in will have to carry the bulk of the cost of mitigation and adaptation. And it is for that reason that the principle and the concept of common but differentiated responsibility is what appealed us when we had discussions in Rio in 1992.
Right. Well, this issue of international cooperation on the working class basis is clearly what you're speaking to. And we need that. We need that. Okay, we have some time in the panel. I would like to open to the panel to get to say, I don't know how we can do this exactly, but Michael, but to ask the panelists if they have other thoughts or comments they'd like to make based on the discussion before we open it to the general question and answer. I think we have time for both.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so let's do that. Any panelists who'd like to speak just should indicate or just, okay, let's go to Anna. That's great. Let's start with Anna. Start. And Anna, then Samantha, then Mariano. Okay. Anna?
Mira, he tomado la palabra enseguida.
I have taken the time to speak because we haven't talked about something very important, and it is the gender in the just transition. And this is a very worrisome issue because in a report that we just published from WHO and with the Inter-American Bank of Development, what we have seen is that that we have, around 80% of it is male, because our jobs created in sectors where male are the majority, and the 20% of those jobs that is created in sectors where woman is majority. So in the year 2030, we can create new jobs, green jobs in Latin America, in a scenario of climate ambition, but the inequality in gender is still there. So the majority of the jobs are going to men, and the minority, which is 20%, is going to women. So the gender dimension in the just transition, we need all of us globally put it on the table, because women are in worse shape than in any level, in salary, in informality. They have more informality. They're the majority in the care. We need to talk about this problem. And I think this is an excellent moment to refer to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Samantha, then Mariano, and then Woodrush again. Samantha, please.
Yeah, I mean, also just to react a little bit to what you said, Anna, can't agree more. And then also in this crisis, what we see is that women are losing work and livelihoods to much, much greater extent than men. Not that it's good for anybody, but really, like, poor and working class women are hit really hard. And we're seeing a lot of women just pull out from the workforce to the extent that they're able to do that. I think two things. I mean, we work really just with unions in high emitting sectors. And so like industrial sectors like energy, oil and gas, so on, steel, auto, and those are male dominated jobs primarily because we live in patriarchy, right? That's one of the systems we're living in. So so two ways to address that when you're working in a practical way on a just transition plan is, one, does the recovery plan or the greening of industry plan have some kind of pathway for women to be trained in the trade or occupation and occupational set-asides for women, people from marginalized communities? That's one super practical thing. The other thing is that, like, a good just transition is based on social dialogue with unions and employers and governments, yes, but often it's about a regional plan, right? So it's not enough just to get a transition within the company. You're going to have a transition that lifts the whole region, because often we're talking about areas that are deindustrialized or have just one industry and everyone is dependent on it. And a big part of a good regional plan is actually, again, back to this foundation of fair tax and public spending. It has schools, it has hospitals, it has infrastructure, it has research, it has all of these things where women can get more jobs, especially if that, is part of the public policy making, if that's in the, in the government procurement or in the standards that are set for that. And then you get an economy, ideally a regional economy, where it's good for people to stay and work, right? So, you don't have people moving out, young people moving out of areas because there's no work. And also where you have more and better jobs, for formal jobs for women. I mean, that should at least be the goal. I'll just stop there.
Okay. Mariano,
Muy bien.
your turn, please. Yes.
Yo solamente voy a comentar tres cosas brevemente.
Three things, very briefly. The rhythm of the application of the policies has to be different. Not every country is in the same condition to face the same challenges, and the countries in the north have to help the countries in the south, because there can't be a sustainable development in an unequal ground. And what we have here is inequality of people, of countries, and inequality between the countries. And it's something that in the last intervention of, I think it was Dinga, and I'm completely agreeing. Now, another thing is hope. The hope in a lot of sectors and territories that have been depending on a series of activities like carbon emissions and thermal emissions. And they have built their world around it. And the perspective of having a future beyond that, of conditions that are not going to be repeating again. And a third aspect, we are trying to put forward a social dialogue, but it doesn't depend just in some, it depends on other people. We have to build up our own proposals strategically so that beyond that social dialogue in different contexts, we can evolve and have a message that is much, much unifying.
Thank you. Woodrush.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to respond to Ana Belén Sanchez. In the first adopted in 2015. Now, I'm not sure whether it's the same guidelines or not, but I was part of that ILO, this tripartite meeting at the end of, well, I think it was around October, November, somewhere 2015, that adopted a whole set of guidelines, and there were a number of there were a number of key areas, focus areas, and so on. But, in as much as I was part of that meeting, I can't say I walked away from that ILO meeting with a sense of optimism. And I'm saying this, and I'm saying this very frankly, because the document that, and remember, through social dialogue, it's a question of trying to reach, agreement based on consensus. And even though that document was adopted and passed, and it's not a bad document, but there are limitations to that document, and there are limitations to that guideline, to those guidelines. For one, the guidelines are very weak. And when this comes back to the whole issue of North and South. The guidelines are very weak on the issue of transfer of technology, the issue of localization and local content of industry, which was part of our REI PPP program, but hasn't really materialized. Because there is this hold by the North, and the North has very strong, they have a sort of the dominant, for instance, from bid window 1 to bid window 4, the dominance in building a renewable energy industry in South Africa, for instance, the northern countries, and particularly in European, they have control, they have dominance over construction, engineering, investments, and so on. And if we take that ILO document and we look at it, it's weak on localization. It's weak on local content. These things they just don't automatically take place because there is a document in place. They're there, governments look at them. If you take the ILO, for instance, it's just a fleeting comment on localization, transfer of skills and technology and so on. It's all tied up with, well, so long as it doesn't conflict with WTO. And we all have different understandings about the WTO. So we've got to be very careful here in that when the ILO puts forward a document, is that we've got to flag out where are the weak issues. Because if the South is to materially benefit from the transition, then they're going to need technology. Yes, they're going to need investments. But the transition is more likely to happen when there's collective ownership of these resources. If there's no collective ownership of these resources, multinational companies and so on, as Dinga pointed out in the last few comments, they have a stranglehold. And it's historical and so on. But we're not really going to move much on the transition. We're not really going to build. We need, if workers are displaced from traditional energy sectors and there isn't a space to absorb them, then we are failing. Then we are failing, and it's going to become a much more prolonged process. The transition is going to become a much longer process than we anticipate. So yeah, so that's it, and hopefully the ILO will rethink some of these issues around localization, local content, transfer of technology, and so on. Thanks.
You're welcome. Yes, Samantha, I think probably you should speak. Yes, please.
Podrías hablar, sí, adelante.
Super quick reaction to you.
Una reacción muy rápida.
I think so like what's happened in Europe is that you have these former state-owned utilities, as you know, that have benefited from European renewables and
formales de energías renovables.
And then they've managed, they've been partially privatized or whatever, and they've become renewable multinationals. Right? And as Mariana knows, at home, those companies like Iberdrola, those companies are wall-to-wall union. Doesn't mean we always like them and we never have strikes or industrial action, but we have a pretty good grip on our industrial relations with these companies. So one of the things that the global has been doing,
que lo que hemos estado haciendo.
Yeah, we've got a little issue with the translation. I'll just stop for a second.
Yeah, there's a problem.
Yep.
We got it back? Okay, try it again, Samantha, please.
Okay. So one of the things that we've been doing, including with our comrades in the Spanish federations, is working with the unions that organize these gigantic companies at home to put pressure on them to have good labor standards everywhere they operate and also throughout their supply chains. So that's, and that's part of the picture of what's happened in South Africa, but it's also happening in the US, where you have these companies coming to the United States and, hiring contractors who are always non-union, have health and safety violations all the time and so on. So I think that's one part of it, is like, how can we work together as the labor movement to hold these companies accountable? They don't get a free pass just because they're green. The other part of it is we're in a period where, like, who the hell knows what's happening with the WTO? So personally, I feel that this is a moment where we should be pushing quite hard on these issues about local content, because after 4 years of a Trump regime, we actually don't really have, functioning trade relations or a global functioning trade regime. And it might be a good opening to try to rewrite some of the rules on trade so that we get the benefits in terms of jobs, technology transfer, local employment for these projects that are being built in part with subsidies from our governments. I mean, that would be one approach. The last thing is also about privatization, right? So another sore point with these big renewable energy companies is that in countries like Chile, where virtually everything has been privatized, European renewable giants have come in and bought up the local utility, and then their labor practices aren't as good. Everybody gets a worse contract. Lots of people lose their jobs. So that's another thing that needs to be
Thank you. I think that we've gone around twice, except for Dinga. Would you like to speak once more, please? Dinga? Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to point to what Anna raised about the need to put the issue of gender at the center of this discussion on just transition. Although the union that I work for is male dominated, and the sectors in which we organize are predominantly employing men. But the people who inhale the emissions that come out of these power plants are in the communities and include women. And even when the men are sick, the role in society of women and the burden of care falls on women. And I think it's important if one looks at the climate justice charter that's come out of the movements here. It has put the issue of care at the center of just transition. Similarly, another important document that has come out in the last few months, which is the socio-ecological platform for Latin America, has a section that puts the issue of care. And I think what COVID has done is to push onto the fore this question of care. So I just wanted to agree with Anna on that.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we have some time for general questions. Michael, do we have anything?
Yes, we have a few. And,
yeah.
Apologize because we are not going to get to all of them, and there's a lot of good questions.
I bet.
I'm prioritizing questions that I know have been on a lot of people's minds and conversations we've had, and some of the panelists have already spoken to this. But the first one is about who's paying for the transition. Is it all government money? This was directed originally to Mariano. Is it all government money in Spain, or are companies contributing to the cost of the transition? I think that would be a good question for everyone.
Well, who would like to take a shot at that?
Pues yo mismo.
I would like to answer. So let's see. Just transition, as I said, it's a hope. And what we pretend with this is to have a better future for the affected areas. And in this moment, as I was saying before, it is a traumatizing process to change a lifestyle for another, especially around mining. The territories establish a kind of a lifestyle. And what we do believe that we have to keep going because they have possibilities in basis of the new technologies and the new endogenous resources to have a different future. So who's going to be paying? Well, those who have brought us here, right? Basically. And in this case, we have to help them out in terms of investment from the states. And we also are very lucky that in Europe, they have actually proposed the ecological transition as a way forward. And one of our obligations is to help people who are affected and establish the umbrellas, social umbrellas that are needed so people are not affected in their basic needs.
Very good. Michael, does anyone else like to get on that question?
May I say something about it?
I would like to say something.
Hold on. I think Samantha first and then Anna. Samantha, please.
Okay, just briefly, I mean, one way to sort of capture the public benefits of a just transition are where you have a state-owned enterprise, like for example, Eskom in South Africa. If Eskom is able to transform and to develop renewables itself, then you can recycle the profits from that and the jobs into the economy. And I live in Norway, where we have a lot of state-owned enterprises, including our, big utility, Statkraft, which is 100% state-owned, but also our oil and energy company. But I think another model you actually have from the US, right? And by the way, it shouldn't just be governments, although there is this foundation of fair tax. You also have to, as workers, we have to try to claw back as much of the value of our labor from the companies as possible. So that's portable training, that's our benefits, that's retaining and retraining and redeploying us in the company while it transforms. And then externally, for governments, it's about getting a fund from companies for transition and cleanup while the companies are still solvent.
Right.
Because the problem they were facing is we get these companies at the end of their, where they're almost tapped out, and then we're like, oh, I guess the public has to pay for transition. But like, why is that? There should be, in the same way you have with nuclear power, you should have a fund that they're paying into that's going to pay for the end of life of the asset, or indeed of the industry.
Thank you. Anna, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Oh, she's speaking English.
Perdón, que me fui al inglés. Es este tema del coste.
So it's regarding the cost of transition, because when we talked about just transition, this is always mentioned, and I work in Latin America, and in many cases, it is not necessary to have additional money or funds. It is, through the policies in each one of the states, and this is what is happening in Latin America, the ones that have to make the change to a more sustainable mode of production and more respectful of labor, and through the national policies, maybe it's ingenious what I'm saying, but that's the way it is. If we have a completely radically different plan, well, we don't need to have, more workers that need to be prepared, because the labor force is going to be prepared to take jobs in the new sector. So we need to have a push from the bottom up, so the national policy can change. And this is what Woodrow was saying. If there is a push from the bottom, and the unions and the employers have a lot of strength in this, then we can have a development policy that is based on sectors that are more respectful of workers and labor rights and the environment. So I do think, from the point of view of my experience, that this is the only road forward, that we cannot do. We don't have time for anything else. We don't have the capacity as humanity to be able to do things differently.
Thank you. Before we conclude, I want to, because we are at the end of our time, before I hand it back to Michael, I wanted to thank the panelists, Anna, Samantha, Woodrush, Dinga, and Mariano, for your participation in this, I think, very vigorous and important discussion. I enjoyed myself. And I want to just make a couple points, and I'm going to hand it over to Michael, and he'll conclude. That it seems to me that a united people's movement, working class movement, is integral to solving this transitions issues. Very important aspect of this. The actual economic and social questions of the masses of people, including the questions of this question of gender, which was raised towards the end, must be addressed in very serious ways. And that a vigorous international cooperation and coordination is key in this area as well. And we cannot forget this point, that transition has to be paid for. So the question of who pays for it, this is what I meant before about whose ox gets gored, is clear that it should be those who put us in this mess. And also responsible governments who have intelligent public policy can play a major role throughout the world. That's what I wanted to say, just from listening and thinking about this, thinking about it before I got here, and then listening for the last hour and a half or so. Thank you all very much. Michael, it's back to you.
Great, thank you, Dick. First of all, I want to start with some apologies, because obviously we just touched on the tip of the iceberg today. So there are regions in the world, particularly Asia, South Asia. I know Karen Ashiki had a question regarding India we weren't able to touch on. So stay tuned. I'm hoping we're able to continue this conversation and include other regions of the globe around this question of just transition. Also want to obviously appreciate folks that really contributed to putting this conversation together. I want to thank Dimitri Steves from the Political Science Department of Colorado State University, and Vivian Price from the other CSU, Cal State University in Dominguez Hills, for helping us to connect with some of our panelists today. And then some of our staff people like Lauren Burke, Judy Asman, and Leo Blaine for being technical support for for today. So what we're going to do, I know folks have asked for the chat box and all the links and everything in there. So we're going to save that chat. And as I mentioned earlier, everybody who registered will get the link to the webinar, and it will be posted on our website at laborforsustainability.org. So you're free to download that, share that with whoever you want, and revisit this. And we'll send the questions to the panelists, and they might be following up with you to continue the conversation. So I want to thank all of our panelists. It's been a really tremendous and I think really informative conversation, and obviously something we could spend 3 days digging into some of the topics that we just started on today. And lastly, I want to thank President Richard Litzitz again from the Western New York Area Labor Federation for moderating this panel today, and look forward to being in touch with all of you in the future on working on this very important and urgent question of just transition. So thank you all for joining us from around the world, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we will be in touch soon. Thank you. Oh, and lastly, let's not forget our interpreters. So Silvia Escarcega and Milena Quadra for interpreting today and doing such a great job. And apologies for the inconvenience of some of our technical difficulties, but you handled it all very, very well. So thank you. And take care.